The desert wind carried a low, whispering song as the sun dipped behind the limestone cliffs of Thebes. Golden light brushed against the rugged landscape, casting shadows that seemed to stretch like ghosts of forgotten kings. For centuries, these cliffs had guarded secrets that few dared to disturb, secrets buried deep beneath the sand, sealed in chambers where time itself appeared frozen. It was the year 1250 BCE, and Egypt stood at the height of its power under the reign of Pharaoh Ramses II. Temples soared toward the heavens, statues of gods and kings watched silently over the Nile, and scribes filled papyrus scrolls with accounts of battles, treaties, and divine rituals. Yet, beyond the glory, there lingered a silent obsession, the afterlife. Every pharaoh, noble, and high priest longed for eternal life, not only in the field of reeds, as their gods promised, but in memory. Tombs became monuments of ambition, carved into rock and filled with treasures to outlast dynasties. But hidden beneath this grandeur was a constant fear: tomb raiders. Even in antiquity, greed had its own priests. Among those who walked the sands of Thebes was Menenhotep, a young scribe of humble origins. His father had served in the temple of Ammonius, copying sacred hymns, but died before teaching his son much of the craft. Menenhotep inherited his father's reed pens and inkstone, yet his heart carried something else, a yearning to uncover truths the priests refused to share. He often wandered beyond the temple's columns, sketching fragments of hieroglyphs found on broken stones, listening to whispers of laborers who worked in the Valley of the Kings. Rumors spread of hidden shafts, concealed doorways, and chambers untouched since the dawn of Egypt's glory. To Menenhotep, these were not just stories. They were invitations. One evening, after transcribing royal decrees by flickering oil lamps, Menenhotep met with his childhood friend, Nakht, a stonecutter whose family had worked for generations in the necropolis. Nakht's hands were rough, scarred by chisels, but his spirit carried the weight of secrets. "They build deeper now," Nakht said, lowering his voice. "Ramses demands tombs that no thief can reach. Passages are sealed with rubble, false walls hide the true burial chamber. My father says some shafts descend so far, the air itself turns to poison." Menenhotep's eyes widened. "And yet, even those tombs are found. Nothing stays hidden forever." Nakht glanced around the torchlit courtyard, where other workers huddled with bread and beer. His voice dropped to a whisper. "There are tombs no one speaks of. Abandoned chambers, hidden by decree of the priests. They say within them lie rulers who were erased from memory. Pharaohs condemned, their names chiseled out, their legacies silenced." Menenhotep's pulse quickened. To uncover such a tomb was to challenge the gods themselves. Yet the thought consumed him. That night, he dreamed of narrow tunnels lit by flickering torches, of walls painted with constellations, and of a sealed door bearing no name, only the mark of a falcon with broken wings. He woke before dawn, his breath heavy, as though he had been wandering the underworld itself. Days turned into weeks, and whispers of a hidden tomb grew louder. Merchants in the bazaar spoke of foreign diggers who paid handsomely for maps of burial grounds. Priests warned against disturbing the houses of eternity. Still, Menenhotep and Nakht found themselves drawn deeper into the mystery. Their chance came unexpectedly. During a seasonal flood of the Nile, part of a cliff face near Deir el-Medina collapsed, revealing a narrow fissure in the rock. Workers dismissed it as a natural crack, yet Nakht, with a mason's eye, knew better. "This is no accident," he muttered, running his fingers along the stone. "Someone carved this, then buried it beneath rubble." Menenhotep's throat tightened. "A hidden passage?" They returned under the cover of night, carrying only an oil lamp, chisels, and a roll of papyrus for sketches. The desert was mercilessly quiet, broken only by the cry of a distant jackal. As Nakht struck away loose rock, a rush of cold air escaped the fissure, carrying with it the scent of earth untouched for centuries. They squeezed inside, their lamp casting wild shadows on the limestone walls. The tunnel sloped downward, narrow and suffocating, until it opened into a chamber with faded paintings, hunters chasing gazelles, priests offering incense, a pharaoh standing tall before the gods. But something was wrong. The figure of the king had been carved out, his name erased. Even the gods' faces had been struck away. Menenhotep felt a chill. This was meant to be forgotten. At the center of the chamber lay a sealed doorway, plaster crumbling but intact. On it, faint but visible, was the falcon with broken wings, just as in Menenhotep's dream. Nak's hands trembled as he traced the carving. Who was buried here? Before Menenhotep could answer, the ground beneath them shuddered faintly, as though the earth itself warned them back. Dust rained from the ceiling, and the flame of the lamp flickered violently. Yet Menenhotep could not turn away. He felt as though destiny itself had placed him here. He leaned close to the wall, running his fingers along the hieroglyphs that survived. They spoke of betrayal, of a ruler who defied both gods and priests. A name once carved here had been hammered out with rage. The silence of the tomb pressed down on them, heavy as stone. They knew they should leave, report what they found, perhaps even seal it again. But something far stronger bound them to this chamber, the need to know the truth. Menenhotep whispered, more to himself than to Nak, if we open this, Egypt's forgotten history may rise again. Nak swallowed hard, his gaze fixed on the sealed door. And if we do, what else will rise with it? The oil lamp sputtered, its flame struggling for life, casting long, trembling shadows across the broken falcon. Neither of them moved. And in that silence, the tomb seemed to breathe. The tomb seemed to breathe, as if the earth itself held its breath in anticipation. The flame of the oil lamp steadied for a moment, then dimmed again, leaving Menenhotep and Nak in a halo of shifting shadows. Nak wiped his palms on his linen kilt. We should go, he whispered, his voice cracked with unease. This is not work for two men alone. If the priests discover us. Menenhotep interrupted, his eyes fixed on the broken falcon carved into the plastered doorway. If the priests discover us, they will bury the truth forever. You know how they erase names, how they silence history. Do you not wonder who this was? Why they tried so hard to hide him? Nak hesitated. His family had labored for generations in the Valley of the Kings, cutting tombs for pharaohs, sealing them with reverence. He knew the punishment for disturbing sacred ground. Yet he also felt the tug of curiosity. To touch the forbidden was dangerous, but to glimpse the forgotten was irresistible. Menenhotep leaned closer, running his fingers over faint traces of hieroglyphs that had escaped destruction. Look, he said, pointing to a cluster of signs. This speaks of a king who defied both Ammonius and Ra, who sought to raise another god above them. Do you see these symbols? Nak squinted. His knowledge of hieroglyphs was poor, but even he recognized the sun disk, flanked by rays reaching down like hands. His stomach tightened. The Aten, he murmured. The heretic king. Menenhotep nodded slowly. Akhenaten. The name lingered in the air like smoke. Though years had passed since his reign, the memory of Akhenaten still stirred unease. He had built a new city, Amarna, and commanded Egypt to worship one god alone, Aten, the sun disk. To many, it was blasphemy. After his death, the priests of Ammonius restored their power, erasing Akhenaten's name and smashing his monuments. But what if his tomb had not been destroyed? What if it had been hidden? Nak stepped back, his voice shaking. If this is his resting place, then we stand in a cursed chamber. The priests damned his name for a reason. Menenhotep's eyes gleamed with conviction. Or perhaps they damned him because he threatened their power. What if the truth is not as they told us? What if he was not a heretic, but a visionary? The chamber fell silent again. Dust drifted lazily in the air, catching the weak light of the lamp. The two men stood at the threshold of history, caught between fear and obsession. Finally, Nak sighed. If we go further, there is no turning back. Menenhotep touched the plastered door gently, as though it might open with his breath. Then let us go further. For 3 nights, they returned in secret, widening the fissure in the cliff so they could carry in their tools. By day, Nak worked among the other stonecutters, his arms heavy with exhaustion, while Menenhotep continued his duties at the temple scriptorium. They spoke of nothing in public, for fear that loose tongues might carry word to the priests. On the 4th night, with the moon hidden behind a veil of clouds, Nak struck the plaster one final time. The wall cracked, groaned, and collapsed inward, sending a rush of stale air into their faces. The lamp flickered violently, almost going out, before settling again. They peered through the opening. Beyond lay a corridor, straight and narrow, lined with painted reliefs. The colors, though faded, still clung stubbornly to the walls, blues like the Nile at dawn, reds like the desert sun, golds that shimmered faintly even in the weak lamplight. Menenhotep's heart raced. It has been sealed since the day it was built. Nak raised the lamp, illuminating a figure painted on the wall. It was a man with a long face, narrow eyes, and lips curved in a strange, solemn smile. Rays of the Aten stretched above him, each hand holding an ink, the breath of life. The image was unmistakable. Akhenaten, Nak whispered, his voice trembling. They stepped inside, their sandals crunching softly on the dust of centuries. The corridor sloped downward, deeper into the earth, until it opened into a vast chamber. Columns carved from the bedrock rose like petrified trees, their surfaces inscribed with prayers to Aten. At the center stood a massive stone sarcophagus, its lid intact. Menenhotep froze, overwhelmed by awe. Here, in the silent embrace of stone, lay the remains of the most controversial ruler in Egypt's history. The priests had not destroyed him after all. They had entombed him in secret, hidden from both worshippers and enemies. Nak's knees weakened. He gripped one of the columns for support. We should not be here. The dead demand silence, not intrusion. But Menenhotep stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the sarcophagus. Do you not see what this means? If we record this, if we tell the world, Akhenaten's truth will live again. His voice will not be lost. Nak shook his head. And if the priests find out, we will be buried alive beside him. Menenhotep ignored him. Kneeling before the sarcophagus, he brushed away a layer of dust to reveal hieroglyphs carved into the stone. They told of Akhenaten's devotion to the Aten, of a dream where the sun spoke to him, commanding him to bring truth to Egypt. The words were not the ravings of a heretic. They were the prayers of a man who believed. A sudden sound broke the silence, footsteps. Faint but unmistakable, echoing through the corridor behind them. Nak's eyes widened. He grabbed Menenhotep's arm. We are not alone. They extinguished the lamp, plunging the chamber into darkness. Only the faint glow of the painted gold lingered in the silence. The footsteps grew closer, slow and deliberate. Menenhotep's breath quickened. Who could have followed them? No one knew of the fissure, or so they thought. The sound stopped just beyond the entrance to the chamber. Then, a low voice echoed, firm and commanding. You should not be here. The two men froze. In the dim light, a figure stepped forward, cloaked in linen robes, a bronze amulet of Ammonius gleaming against his chest. It was a priest. The priest raised his torch, illuminating the chamber in a harsh glow. His face was stern, his eyes shadowed with both fury and fear. He studied the sarcophagus, then turned his gaze on the intruders. You dare trespass in a place forbidden by decree of Pharaoh himself. His voice reverberated against the stone walls. Do you know the punishment for such a crime? Nak fell to his knees, trembling. Mercy, Holy One. We meant no harm. We only stumbled upon. Silence, the priest cut him off. He shifted his eyes to Menenhotep, who stood defiantly, clutching his roll of papyrus against his chest. And you are a scribe of the temple, are you not? I know your face. Menenhotep, son of the copyist. What treachery is this? Menenhotep swallowed hard but did not lower his gaze. If this tomb belongs to Akhenaten, why has it been hidden? Why erase his name, yet guard his body? What truth are you trying to bury? The priest's eyes narrowed. You know nothing of truth. Some names deserve erasure. Some kings bring ruin. Akhenaten nearly destroyed Egypt with his madness. This place is a warning, not a memory. Menenhotep's voice shook, but his conviction burned. Or perhaps it is a memory you fear. The priest stepped closer, the torchlight flickering across his face. You will forget what you saw. both of you. The penalty for speaking of this is death, and death will come swiftly if you disobey." Nacht bowed his head, his voice pleading. "We will say nothing, Holy One. I swear it." But Menenhotep clenched his fists. He could not promise silence. Something inside him had awakened, a fire no priest could extinguish. The priest seemed to sense his defiance. He stared at Menenhotep for a long, tense moment, then lowered his voice. "Leave this place. Seal the fissure. If you return, your bones will join his." He turned sharply, striding back into the corridor, his torchlight fading into darkness until the chamber lay silent once more. For hours, Menenhotep and Nacht sat in the tomb, neither speaking. The presence of the priest weighed heavily on them. They had not been the first to find the hidden chamber, nor were they its only keepers. The priests of Ammonius had known all along. At last, Nacht stood, his body trembling. "We must forget this. Seal the passage and walk away. I will not risk my family's lives for a dead king." Menenhotep rose slowly, his eyes still fixed on the sarcophagus. "I cannot forget. If I do, the truth dies here forever." Nacht grasped his arm, desperation in his voice. "Then you will die with it." Menenhotep did not answer. He reached into his satchel, pulled out his reed pen and inkstone, and began to sketch the chamber by the fading light of the torch. Every column, every carving, every symbol of the Aten, he recorded them all. If the priests silenced him, his papyrus might one day speak in his place. As the night waned, they sealed the plastered door as best they could, hiding their work beneath rubble. But Menenhotep carried with him more than drawings. He carried a dangerous truth, one that could shake the foundations of Egypt's faith. And deep within the chamber, beneath the heavy stone lid of the sarcophagus, the silence seemed almost alive. As though the forgotten king himself waited, listening, for the day his name would be spoken again. The night air was cool when Menenhotep and Nacht finally emerged from the fissure. The stars glittered over Thebes like scattered jewels, indifferent to the secrets unearthed below. The two men carried silence between them, their footsteps heavy with exhaustion and fear. Nacht broke the silence first. "We should never return." His voice was hoarse, almost pleading. The priest was clear. "He watches us now. One misstep, and we are finished." Menenhotep walked ahead, clutching the papyrus roll close to his chest. "Then let him watch. What I have seen cannot be unseen. You may turn away, but I cannot." Nacht stopped in his tracks. "And what will you do? Proclaim Akhenaten's name in the streets? Write his hymns on temple walls? You'll be dragged before the priests and flayed for blasphemy." Menenhotep turned to face him, his eyes shining in the faint starlight. "I will write the truth. If not for our time, then for another. The priests cannot silence ink forever." Nacht shook his head, despair etched into his features. "Ink cannot protect you. Nor me. Remember what happened to the workmen who spoke of hidden chambers last season? Their bodies were found in the river, bound hand and foot. I will not share their fate." His words hung heavy in the night. Menenhotep said nothing more. They parted ways in silence, Nacht disappearing into the darkness of Deir el-Medina, Menenhotep toward the scriptorium where he would resume his duties by daylight, as though nothing had happened. The following days passed in uneasy stillness. Menenhotep copied hymns to Ammonius and decrees of Ramses II with steady hands, but his thoughts strayed to the tomb hidden beneath the cliffs. By night, in secret, he studied the sketches he had made, the strange elongated features of Akhenaten's likeness, the rays of the Aten, the prayers carved into stone. Each detail deepened his conviction. He began to compile his notes into a secret scroll, a record not only of the tomb but of the truth the priests sought to bury. He wrote of Akhenaten's rise, his devotion to Aten, the building of Amarna, and the fury of the priests when the old gods were abandoned. Menenhotep's words were careful, precise, but tinged with awe. He did not call Akhenaten a heretic. He called him a man who dreamed differently. But secrecy is fragile in a city of whispers. One evening, as Menenhotep left the temple with his satchel of scrolls, he felt the weight of unseen eyes upon him. He glanced over his shoulder. A figure lingered in the shadows of the colonnade, cloaked and silent. He quickened his pace through the narrow alleys, the smell of roasting fish and burning incense clinging to the air. The footsteps followed, steady and deliberate. Menenhotep's heart pounded. He ducked into a side street, weaving past vendors closing their stalls, until he reached his modest dwelling. He slipped inside and barred the door, his breath ragged. The silence that followed was too perfect. The figure had not tried to enter. Whoever it was only wanted him to know he was being watched. Menenhotep sat in the darkness of his chamber, clutching his scrolls to his chest. Fear pressed upon him, but beneath it burned defiance. He whispered aloud, as though to the ghost of the forgotten king, "They may watch, but they will not erase you again." Meanwhile, Nakht kept to his work, carving stone in the Valley of the Kings. He tried to bury the memory of the tomb, but it gnawed at him. His dreams were restless. Sometimes he saw the broken falcon carved into the plaster, sometimes the priest's cold eyes, and sometimes Akhenaten himself, his narrow face glowing with the rays of the Aten. At dawn one morning, as he carried chisels to the worksite, he was approached by two men in plain linen robes. They spoke with calm authority, though their words carried the weight of command. "You are Nakht, son of Hapu?" one asked. "Yes," Nakht answered warily. The man's eyes narrowed. "You were seen with the scribe Menenhotep. The priests wish to know what business took you into the cliffs beyond Deir el-Medina." Nakht's mouth went dry. His first instinct was to deny everything, but the memory of the fissure, the tomb, and the sarcophagus pressed upon him like a stone. He forced a weak smile. "We went only to hunt jackals that had been disturbing the graves. Nothing more." The men exchanged a look, their expressions unreadable. "Be careful where you wander," the second man said. "The desert keeps its secrets, and those who disturb them seldom live to tell." That day, whispers spread through the temple precinct. Some scribes spoke of a scribe gone mad, one who scribbled forbidden hymns when he thought no one was watching. Others claimed the priests had found him guilty already, though no trial had been announced. Menenhotep copied hymns dutifully at his desk, his face calm, though every muscle burned with tension. They left as swiftly as they had appeared, their presence like a shadow cast upon Nakht's heart. He realized then that the priest had not only warned them. He had set watchers upon them both. That night, Nakht visited Menenhotep in secret. He found his friend hunched over a lamp, ink staining his fingers, scrolls spread out across the floor. "Are you mad?" Nakht hissed, storming inside. "You're still writing? Still recording? They already suspect us." Menenhotep looked up calmly, though his eyes were bloodshot from sleepless nights. "All the more reason to continue. If they silence me, these scrolls may survive. Someone must know." Nakht slammed his fist against the wall. "And what of me? Do you not see they watch us both? I have a wife, children. If you bring their wrath upon me, you doom not only yourself but all I love." The words struck Menenhotep like a lash. For a moment, he faltered, staring at his friend's desperate face. He had not meant to endanger Nakht's family. Yet the fire within him refused to be extinguished. "I will not ask you to share my burden," Menenhotep said softly. "Walk away, Nakht. Protect your family. Leave me to this path." Nakht's anger gave way to sorrow. He sank onto the floor, his head in his hands. "I cannot pretend it never happened. That tomb will haunt me until my death." The two men sat in silence, the lamp's flame trembling between them. Outside, the night hummed with crickets and distant jackals. Inside, the weight of forbidden truth bound them together, even as fear tore them apart. Weeks passed. Menenhotep continued his work in secret, but he grew gaunt, his eyes shadowed with weariness. The pressure of secrecy and the constant sense of being followed gnawed at him. At times, he thought he saw the broken falcon symbol scratched into walls where he had never drawn it. At other times, he felt a presence in his chamber, watching as he wrote. One evening, while studying his sketches of the tomb, he heard a soft knock at the door. He opened it cautiously and found not Nacht, but a woman cloaked in dark linen. Her face was veiled, her posture confident. "You seek truth," she said quietly, her voice steady. "But you are not the only one." Menenhotep's pulse quickened. "Who are you?" The woman lifted her veil just enough for him to see eyes sharp as obsidian. "A servant of memory. The priests think they alone guard Egypt's past, but there are others who remember. Others who preserve what they try to destroy." Menenhotep's breath caught. "You know of the tomb?" She nodded. "And more. Akhenaten was not the only one they tried to erase. There are others, buried in silence, waiting to be found." Her words struck him with both awe and dread. If true, then Akhenaten's tomb was not an anomaly but part of a greater effort to reshape history. "Why tell me this?" Menenhotep asked. The woman's gaze did not waver. "Because you have already crossed the threshold. You cannot turn back now. And because truth, once found, demands a voice." Before he could ask more, she turned and disappeared into the night, leaving Menenhotep trembling in the doorway, his heart pounding with both fear and exhilaration. The following day, news rippled through Thebes: a group of laborers had been found dead near the cliffs. Their bodies bore no wounds, yet their faces were twisted in terror. Rumor spread like wildfire. Some said it was the curse of the tombs. Others whispered of priestly punishment. Nacht sought out Menenhotep in a panic. "Do you hear what they say? It is beginning. The gods themselves are warning us." Menenhotep shook his head, though his own stomach churned with unease. "No, Nacht. This is no curse. This is the hand of men, men who fear the truth." Nacht grabbed his arm. "Then leave it be. For the sake of your life, for mine. Burn the scrolls, destroy the sketches. It is the only way." But Menenhotep pulled away. "If I burn them, I burn Akhenaten's voice. And perhaps the voices of others. Would you have Egypt live forever in lies?" Nacht's eyes filled with tears of frustration. "And would you have us die for truths that no one dares speak?" The two men stood in bitter silence, their friendship strained to its breaking point. Outside, the city of Thebes carried on, unaware of the storm brewing beneath its sands. As the moon waxed full, Menenhotep returned to the fissure alone. He carried only a lamp, his satchel, and the conviction that the truth demanded more than ink. He descended into the tomb once more, his footsteps echoing against the cold stone. The chamber was unchanged, silent and watchful. The sarcophagus loomed in the center, its lid heavy and unyielding. Menenhotep placed his hand upon it, his heart thundering. "If your story is to live again," he whispered, "then let me see you, Akhenaten." He pressed his ear to the stone, listening to the silence. For a long moment, nothing stirred. Then, or perhaps it was only his mind, he felt the faintest vibration, as though something within the sarcophagus stirred against the weight of centuries. Menenhotep staggered back, his breath ragged. The lamp flickered, shadows dancing wildly across the painted walls. And in the silence, he thought he heard a whisper, not from the chamber, not from the wind, but from deep within his own heart. "Remember me." The moment passed, but it left him trembling. He knew now that he could not turn back. The truth was no longer something he sought. It had claimed him. And as he left the tomb that night, he did not see the figure watching from the shadows of the corridor, torchlight glinting against a bronze amulet of Ammonius. The torchlight in the corridor flickered against the amulet of Ammonius, its bronze surface glowing like a silent threat. Menenhotep had not seen him, but the priest had watched every step, every whispered vow inside the tomb. The keeper of memory had been marked. By dawn, Menenhotep returned to the scriptorium, exhaustion pulling at his limbs. He hid his satchel beneath loose floor tiles, the scrolls inside wrapped carefully against dust. Yet his hands still trembled. The voice he had heard, whether real or born of his fevered mind, echoed through him like a command. "Remember me." But he was no longer the only one who remembered. When evening came, he slipped away to Nacht's dwelling. He found his friend sitting outside with his children, carving small toys from scraps of wood. The sight struck Menenhotep with a pang of guilt. Nakht looked up, his expression weary but relieved. "You're still alive," Nakht murmured. "Barely," Menenhotep admitted. "The priests watch me. They know I have seen too much." Nakht sent his children inside and leaned close. "Then end it, Menenhotep. Burn your scrolls. Seal the fissure. Let it be forgotten." But Menenhotep shook his head. "It is too late. If I die, the truth must outlive me. And I will not die with silence on my lips." Nakht closed his eyes, despair written across his face. "You will not only bring death upon yourself, but upon anyone close to you. I cannot follow you further." "I would not ask it of you," Menenhotep said softly. "But promise me this: if something happens to me, take my scrolls. Hide them. Pass them to someone who will guard them." Nakht did not answer. His silence was answer enough. Days later, the city of Thebes awoke to rumor and unease. A decree had been issued from the temple of Ammonius, heretical writings had been discovered, and the author would be punished by order of Pharaoh's priests. Though no name was spoken aloud, Menenhotep knew the decree was meant for him. That night, footsteps gathered outside his dwelling. He heard voices, saw torchlight through the cracks. He knew his time was short. He dug quickly beneath the floor tiles, retrieving the satchel of scrolls. He clutched them to his chest, then slipped out through the rear door into the narrow alleys of Thebes. His breath came fast, his sandals slapping against the packed earth. Behind him, voices shouted, and torches flared brighter. He ran toward the cliffs. The fissure yawned ahead, the desert wind whistling like a call to sanctuary. Menenhotep squeezed inside, his lamp flickering as he descended into the tomb once more. The chamber greeted him with the same solemn silence, the sarcophagus looming in the center. He laid the satchel at its base, pressing his hands to the cold stone lid. "Forgive me," he whispered, "but I cannot carry you further. May your story sleep here until it is found again." Footsteps thundered in the corridor. The priests had followed. A torchlight burst into the chamber, and the same priest from before stepped forward, his face hard as carved granite. Behind him came two guards, spears glinting in the light. "You were warned," the priest said, his voice low and seething. "Yet still you defy." Menenhotep rose to his feet, his heart pounding, but he did not step back. "You call him a heretic, yet you guard his body. Why? Why bury him here in secret instead of destroying him utterly?" The priest's eyes narrowed. "Because even a heretic king is still a pharaoh. His bones belong to Egypt, not to sand. But his name, his vision, those we erased. That is the balance we keep." Menenhotep's voice shook, but his conviction did not falter. No balance built on lies can last forever. The priest raised a hand, and the guards stepped forward. Their spears touched Menenhotep's chest, forcing him back against the sarcophagus. The torchlight quivered, throwing wild shadows across Akhenaten's painted likeness. "Then you will share his fate," the priest said coldly. Buried in silence. But before the order could be carried out, Nakht burst into the chamber, his chest heaving, sweat pouring down his face. He must have followed the trail, risking everything. "Stop!" he shouted. His voice cracked against the chamber walls. "Do not kill him. He is guilty only of words, not blood." The priest glared. "And words can poison kingdoms. Leave now, stonecutter, if you value your life." But Nakht did not move. He stepped beside Menenhotep, his rough hand gripping his friend's shoulder. "If he dies, so do I. My family has carved your tombs, built your walls, obeyed your decrees. If his crime is truth, then I share it." Menenhotep stared at his friend in shock, his throat tight with gratitude and grief. Nakht had returned when he least expected it, when he most needed it. The priest's eyes flickered with fury. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a hiss. "You think loyalty will save you? Then both of you will vanish into this darkness, and no one will remember your names." He lifted his torch high, ready to signal the guards. But in that instant, the ground trembled. A deep rumble echoed through the chamber, dust cascading from the ceiling. The sarcophagus shuddered beneath Menenhotep's hands. The guards faltered, lowering their spears. The priest froze, his eyes wide. Another tremor followed, stronger, cracking stone along the columns. Paintings flaked from the walls, falling like fragments of memory. The lamp's flame guttered wildly. The priest staggered back, fear breaking through his fury. "The tomb rejects you," he hissed, his voice trembling now. "It is cursed." But Menenhotep's heart surged with conviction. He pressed his palms to the sarcophagus lid, shouting above the roar. "No, it is not a curse. It is a voice. A voice demanding to be remembered." The tremor ceased as suddenly as it had begun. Silence crashed over the chamber, heavy and absolute. The priests and guards exchanged fearful glances, shaken to their core. The priest lowered his torch, his face pale. For a moment, he looked less like a master of memory and more like a man uncertain of his own gods. He turned sharply to the guards. "Seal it. Seal it forever. No word of this leaves these walls." He strode out, his torchlight dwindling into the corridor. The guards followed reluctantly, casting fearful looks back at the sarcophagus. Menenhotep and Nakht were left alone, the air heavy with dust and silence. When the danger had passed, Nakht collapsed against a column, coughing. "We will not survive this, Menenhotep. They will kill us tomorrow, if not tonight." Menenhotep knelt beside the sarcophagus, his hands still trembling. He pulled the satchel closer, clutching the scrolls to his chest. "Then let these survive, if nothing else. Hide them, Nakht. If I fall, promise me you will take them far from here." Nakht stared at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "I promise." Together, they carried the satchel back to the fissure, sealing the chamber once more behind them. They climbed into the night, the stars burning cold above. The priest's threat hung over them, but so did the weight of what they carried, not treasure, not gold, but memory. Weeks later, Menenhotep was gone. Some said he was taken by the priests, others that he fled into the desert, never to return. His dwelling was empty, his inkstones shattered, his name struck from temple records. He became another silence in Egypt's long history. But Nakht kept his promise. He buried the scrolls deep within a jar, sealing it with pitch, and hid it far from Thebes, in a place no priest would think to search. His hands, scarred by stone, trembled as he covered it with earth. He whispered a prayer, not to Ammonius, not to Ra, but to Aten, the sun whose rays touched every life. "May you be remembered." Centuries would pass. Dynasties would fall, temples crumble, and names fade from memory. But beneath the sands of Egypt, the scrolls remained, waiting. One day, when the desert yielded its secrets, voices long silenced would speak again. And when the broken falcon was seen once more, Akhenaten's story would rise from the darkness, not as curse, but as truth. The scribe's ink, carried by friendship and sacrifice, would outlast the chisels of erasure. And so, in silence, memory endured,